Fujairah at night looks almost peaceful from a distance. Tankers riding low in the water, lights blinking along the loading terminal. The kind of quiet that makes people forget how much of the world's oil actually funnels through this stretch of coastline. That calm ends at 3:12 in the morning, when the sky over the Gulf of Oman turns into a wall of moving red dots on every radar screen from Abu Dhabi to the ships offshore. Air raid sirens start howling down the coast almost in sequence, one town picking up the warning from the next. Iran has just launched a full strike against the United Arab Emirates' newest oil lifeline, and the timing is not random. Weeks earlier, Israeli jets had leveled the Natanz nuclear site in a single precision raid, and Tehran wanted the world to know it still had leverage. That leverage sits at the Strait of Hormuz, and tonight Iran intends to slam it shut. What almost nobody watching the news that week understood was that the United States had already quietly built a trap around this exact stretch of water, and Iran was about to walk straight into it. The blockade itself came first. Iranian forces sedded the shipping lanes through the strait with mines packed in tight, overlapping patterns, while Revolutionary Guard spedboats swarmed the channel like a pack of hunting animals circling a wounded target, leaving almost no safe lane for merchant traffic. Oil prices jumped within hours. Overhead, a Mohajer 6 reconnaissance drone flew slow, silent circles, feeding real-time footage back to Iranian commanders, mapping every gap in the defenses before the next wave of the attack. Iran was not just closing a strait, it was trying to choke off a piece of the global economy and dare anyone to stop it. Abu Dhabi, though, had already planned for exactly this. Buried under the desert, the ADCOP pipeline ran for 370 kilometers, quietly pumping millions of barrels a day straight to the port of Fujairah, bypassing Hormuz entirely. Washington had read Iran's playbook long before that night. The moment ADNOC pushed that pipeline to full output, a United States carrier strike group slid into position in the eastern Gulf of Oman, built around a Ford-class carrier acting as a floating airbase, ringed by Arleigh Burke-class destroyers stacked into layered air defense. Nobody in the fleet had to guess what Iran would go after next. They just had to wait for the first shot. Tehran chose patience over a single knockout blow. Instead of one massive strike on the pipeline, the Revolutionary Guard went for a slow bleed, 1,000 small cuts aimed at valves and pump stations rather than Theep itself, while that same Mohajer 6 loitered above, quietly directing the attack like a puppeteer working from a hidden vantage point. The Emirati defense in response was a mix of systems from 3 different countries stitched into one shield. Russian-built Pantsir S-1 units covered the low-altitude approaches. American and Norwegian NASAMS batteries filed the gaps above them. French-designed Go-Wind-class ships patrolled the waters near Fujairah, and American MQ-9 Reaper drones circled the pipeline route around the clock like tireless watchmen. Then the swarm came in low. Dozens of Shahed 136 loitering munitions, launched from ordinary-looking trucks, disguised as civilian vehicles, skimmed the desert floor to slip under radar coverage, aimed not at the pipeline casing itself, but at the control valves and pump stations that kept the whole system alive. At the same moment, Iranian coastal batteries fired off a storm of decoy missiles meant to flood and overwhelm the UAE's sensors. It turned into a brutal math problem: expensive interceptor missiles against cheap disposable drones fired by the dozen. The Pantsir batteries answered by unloading thousands of rounds a minute into the incoming swarm, tearing it apart before it could reach anything that mattered. When that first wave failed to take down the pump stations, Iran escalated. From cliffs along its own coast, a battery of Pave cruise missiles lit their engines and dropped low over the water, aimed squarely at Fujairah port itself, the one exit point that made the entire pipeline worth anything. Take out the port, and 370 kilometers of pipe becomes an oversized, useless storage tank sitting under the sand. This is where the American hand in all of this finally showed itself. High above the Gulf, Navy E-2D Advanced Hawkeye, carrying that unmistakable oversized radar dish on its back, caught the heat signature of the Pave missiles the second they left their launch rails. Washington did not fire a single shot yet. It shared data instead, and data turned out to be the sharper weapon. Through a secure link, the Hawkeye fed the missile's exact flight path straight into the cockpits of Emirati Mirage 2009 fighters. To Iranian sensors, those French-built jets were essentially ghosts. Radars switched completely off, flying blind by their own instruments, but guided in real time by the Hawkeye watching from above. The Mirage squadron closed in and fired Storm Shadow missiles, wiping the Pave launch sites off the map before the Iranian ghosts ever reached the port. For a moment, it looked like a clean win. Then the ground opened up behind them. Iran had expected exactly this counterattack and prepared for it. Hidden under advanced infrared blocking netting, a battery of Khordad-15 air defense systems had been sitting completely dark, emitting nothing, waiting for the Mirages to turn their backs and head home. The instant those jets started their return leg, the Khordad-15 radar snapped on, sweeping the sky, and every Mirage cockpit lit up with a lock-on warning. Iranian crews fired a salvo of Sayad-3 missiles, built specifically to reach high and fast at exactly the altitude fighters used to escape. One Mirage caught mid-maneuver, dropping thermal decoys, took a Sayad-3 blast close enough to its engine to shred the wing with shrapnel. Smoke poured off the aircraft as the formation scattered, their path back toward the Gulf of Oman suddenly blocked, funneled instead toward a kill zone where Iran's coastal defenses could pick them off one at a time. Anyone who has ever felt that gut drop of realizing an escape route just closed behind them will recognize exactly what those pilots felt in that moment. It is worth sitting with that for a second, because it is the same dilemma that shows up again and again in wars like this. Do you trust the plan that got you this far, or do you assume the enemy planed 3 moves ahead of you the whole time? Iran clearly bet on the second option, and for a few seconds it worked. Reinforcements arrived from a direction Iran's sensors simply were not watching. While the Khordad-15 radar stayed fixed on the fleeing Mirages, a flight of F-35 Charlie Lightning IIs slipped in from angle the Iranian network had no time to cover. The instant that Khordad-15 radar had switched on to chase the Mirages, the E-2D Hawkeye had already locked its position and quietly passed the coordinates to the incoming stealth jets. Without ever revealing themselves to Iranian operators, the F-35 Charlies fired AGM-88 Golf missiles, the current Topia radar hunting weapon in the American arsenal. Those missiles homed straight in on every pulse the Khordad-15 radar gave off, the same way a shark tracks blood in water. And the harder the Iranian crews worked to keep their lock on the retreating Mirages, the deeper they dug their own grave. The batteries never even registered the new threat before they were destroyed in a series of precise hits. That was not the end of it either. From the deck of the Ali Burke destroyers offshore, Tomahawk cruise missiles began launching in steady, rhythmic waves, tracing the Iranian coastline and wiping out regional command and control centers one after another with surgical precision. Facing that level of technological pressure, Iranian forces had no real choice left but to abandon their fixed positions entirely and pull surviving launchers deep into the interior, switching to hit-and-run tactics just to keep any air defense capability alive. What Iran lost that night was not only equipment, it lost the initiative across the entire theater, and that is a much harder thing to get back. So what actually turned the tide here? Not the F-35 Charlie, and not the Mirage 2009, as sharp as both performed. It was the E-2D Advanced Hawkeye sitting quietly overhead the entire time. The aircraft runs about 17.6 meters long with a wingspan of 24.6 meters, and that radar dish on its back measures just over 7 meters across. It was never built to dogfight. It was built to watch the whole battlefield and hand that picture to everyone else. 2 Rolls-Royce T56 turboprop engines, each pushing out more than 5,000 horsepower, kept it airborne for hours at a stretch, holding a clear view over hundreds of kilometers. At its core sits the AN/APY-9 radar, operating in the UHF band, capable of tracking thousands of air and sea contacts at once, out past 500 kilometers depending on conditions. That longer UHF wavelength matters most exactly when the enemy tries to jam or spoff shorter wavelength systems, which is precisely why the Hawkeye caught the Khordad-15 radar the instant it switched on to chase the mirages. The real advantage, though, is not the range. It is the sharing. The E-2D does not just find a target for itself, it pushes that data almost instantly to the F-35 Charlie, to the Mirage Squadron, to the Arleigh Burke destroyers, to every node plugged into that network. That is why the Mirages could close in with radars off, and why the F-35 Charlies could fire on the Khordad-15 without ever spending a second hunting for it themselves. Tie every sensor and every weapon into one shared picture, and you get something more dangerous than any single missile or jet. A force that reacts faster than the other side can think. Step back from the tactics for a moment and the bigger picture gets clearer. ADCOP exists because the United Arab Emirates never wanted its entire oil economy hostage to one narrow strait, and on paper that plan works. In practice, a pipeline running hundreds of kilometers across open desert hands an enemy dozens of soft targets, pump stations, valves, the export terminal itself, and defending all of it around the clock costs a staggering amount of money and manpower. If a fight like this one ever actually broke out, nobody should expect it to stay contained to one pipeline or one strait. Ports, refineries, command centers, energy infrastructure across the entire Gulf would likely end up on the target list, and the shock to global oil markets would be immediate. The lesson underneath all of it is less about missiles and more about speed. Iran can field plenty of drones, cruise missiles, and capable air defense systems, but against a force that shares information instantly across every platform, the side that decides fastest usually wins before the side with more firepower even finishes loading its next launcher. The Hawkeye in this story never fired a shot. It did something arguably more decisive. It made sure everyone on its side saw the battlefield the same way, at the same time, before other side even understood what was happening. Which raises the question worth sitting with long after the smoke clears. Is a network like the Hawkeye and its cooperative engagement system really enough to cancel out everything Iran has spent years building toward the strait? Or does Tehran still have a card left that nobody has accounted for yet? That is the part of this story that never really has a clean answer, and maybe it shouldn't.